Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I just want to do another kind of check-in and a wrap-up and just talk about some more books that I have read and maybe what I'm reading. I've kind of fallen into this, what do you call it, a pattern of kind of updating every 3 or so books I read, which seems to be a good pattern. Any more than that and the video gets really long because I apparently like to talk a lot. And any less than that, I don't know, it doesn't feel like enough. Unless there's a book that I really want to do a lengthy discussion on. So I'm just going to update you guys on the last 3 books that I have finished in the past, I don't know, however long. I have kind of ditched the monthly method of wrap-ups and TBRs and stuff because I don't keep track of anymore of what I'm starting and what month and what I'm finishing and which month. It doesn't even matter anymore. I'm just reading, just plain old reading, which is it's just a relief. I don't know. It was getting a little stressful to keep track. But anyways, I'm going to start with the first book that I finished and work up to the ones that I just finished. And one that I started a little while ago and finally finished was Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, or after reading the book, it might be pronounced Eugenides. This was a fantastic read. I did not think, I mean, I had no, preconceptions going in. I hadn't heard about anyone having read it, or I didn't have anyone's thoughts to base this off of. But it just kind of blew me away. This book was fantastic. It was very long. I think it was it was over 500 pages. But what this is about is a girl who's born to a Greek family in Michigan or Detroit, and she's born Calliope, but throughout her life, I think when she reaches puberty, she kind of is discovered that she's actually not a girl. She wasn't born a girl. She appears to be a girl, but she has a gene mutation which inhibits testosterone, I think. I didn't bother looking up the gene. I just kind of took this at face value. I did do some intersex research after this, which is what this girl is. She's an intersex person who appears to be a girl but is actually genetically a male. And this is a real thing. It happens to real people all the time. There are tons of people out there who are intersex, and I just really enjoyed this fictional perspective of what it was like for this, I guess, man now, for this man to grow up as a girl and then later found out that he is actually male. So now I'm going to refer to him as he, but just for background reasons, you're referring to this person as female because he thinks he is female up until puberty when they find out that he is actually male. And what I really thought was a neat way to do this book was it traces the gene responsible, or the genes responsible, something inhibitor, I can't remember it now, but the genes responsible for making this man intersex. So it traces his family all the way back to Greece and where and how it all started and why basically his unique combination of genetics collided and how he came to be. So it traces his whole family, and I think it gets up to the middle of the book where it gets to present day, basically. Or I guess present day meaning around the time he's going through puberty. Amazing book. I really enjoyed this, and it's much more. It is about so much more than just a person being intersex. It's just a whole history of a family, and just their travels from Greece to America, and their struggles and how they're making a living, and their life as Greek American. Amazing, amazing book. I enjoyed it so much. I can't say enough good things about it. If you have been wanting to read Middlesex and you haven't picked it up yet, don't be scared. Pick it up. It's going to be great. Now, the next book that I read after that was finally The Snow Child by this name. I just looked up the pronunciation, and now I can't remember it. Eowyn? It doesn't sound right. Ivy. Eowyn or not Owen. I feel so bad now because I just looked up the pronunciation. But this person wrote The Snow Child. Another fantastic read. It's definitely, I will say this book is very atmospheric, which I loved about it. It's so beautifully written. And what this is about is an older homesteading couple who have moved to Alaska, and they're childless. So they've been married for years and years, and they've never been able to have children. And they're just kind of, I think they've just accepted that and moved to Alaska. They want to start anew. They want to get away from people and not be surrounded by their family and people that knew them. And then one night, they make a snow child out of snow. And then the next day, there's a girl. And they don't know where she's come from. And it's just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to give away too much, but it's kind of along that theme. They don't have a child, and then suddenly this snow child appears and becomes like their child. And it's like a miracle has happened. And it just follows their life as they go along with this, through the years with this snow child. But I will say, this is such a beautiful, beautiful book. Just the descriptions in here and of living in Alaska, and like all the beautiful descriptions of the snow and the ice and the droplets hanging off the end of her husband's beard. It was just beautifully written, beautifully done, and the story was just captivating. Throughout the whole book, though, I personally, you just have this sense, I had this sense of foreboding throughout the whole thing. So many beautiful scenes and settings and heartwarming bits and pieces to this story, but throughout the whole thing, I just had this foreboding sense. It was kind of an emotional read. I didn't cry, you know, it wasn't anything terrible, but it was a gorgeous book. And if you've been wanting to read it, pick it up. It's beautiful. And you know what? It doesn't matter that it's April, because apparently this Saturday on my phone it's showing a snowflake for where we live in North Carolina. Do I think it's going to snow? No, but apparently winter is still clinging on. So it's not too late to read Snow Child and cuddle up with this book. Now, the last book that I finished, or my most recently finished book, is The Girls Who Went Away, The Hidden History of Women Who Surrendered Children for Adoption in the Decades Before Roe v. Wade by Ann Fessler. And this was a nonfiction book, and honestly, read with caution. That would be the main thing I would say, especially if you're an emotional person, or maybe it was extra emotional for me because I am just 4 months post having a baby, so I still have a really young infant who's with me all the time, and I'm feeling all those hormones and emotions. And reading this, it took me much longer than it needed to, not because it wasn't fascinating. I always wanted to read more, but I had to take so many breaks. I could only read one story at a time, or a couple stories at a time, or a chapter at a time, and then I would have to take a break for the night, even though I would have more time to read and I would be dying to read more, but I just couldn't emotionally deal with it. This was, I don't know, it was a pretty tough read. This is a book about women, single, unwed women and girls who got pregnant post World War II and before 1970, is it 74? When Roe v. Wade happened? I can't remember now. So post World War II up to mid 1970s, when it was unthinkable to be a unwed single mother, you just didn't do it. And abortion wasn't available. Birth control was not widely available. So if you got pregnant and when you were sexually active, you didn't get to keep your baby. I mean, that was just unheard of, especially for white middle class American females. That just was unheard of. It was like not even a possibility of a choice. It was like the mindset of society then just wouldn't even let your brain go there, which also makes me wonder what in which directions my brain isn't capable of going today because of the time period that I'm in. And I think I'm a fairly open-minded person, but after reading this, it just makes you wonder like what mental blockages you have due to society that you aren't even aware of. And that's just kind of a side thing that I think is interesting, and I wanted to bring attention to and kind of like make you think a little bit. But I did mark a few pages that I want to read, and I can't remember. Let me look at them real quick. Oh, here's an interesting statistic right here. So I'm going to read a little passage from this page. It says, the stories of women that appear in this book reflect the difference in black and white surrender rates, and the vast majority of the women I interviewed are white, and most were raised in blue-collar or white-collar middle-class homes. Only a small percentage described their families as either poor or affluent. A common belief at the time was that girls from affluent homes routinely obtained abortions out of the country or through doctors in their communities who charged a hefty sum. Those who desired and could afford an illegal abortion could often find one. It is estimated that between 250,000 and 1 million illegal abortions took place each year in the post-war years. These backroom abortions were often highly dangerous and responsible for 40% of all maternal deaths. Some women who might have been able to afford these illegal procedures chose not to get such abortions because of that danger. And I just want to include that statistic. I wasn't aware, and I didn't really think about this time period, but or think about this. It's never been the forefront of my mind or something I've ever considered. But after reading this, if someone had brought this subject up to me prior to reading this, I would never have known how many women actually went through secret pregnancies and secretly gave away their babies for adoption. We always think of this time period, especially back in the 50s especially in my mind, and 60s I guess too. We think that people somehow magically had less sex then. There were less teenage girls engaging in sex, and boys, I guess, we assume that too, because how else are they having sex, and getting pregnant? But we always think of that time period as just being less sexually active, and after reading this, I mean, people and teenagers especially were just as sexually active back then as they are today. So everyone always wants to comment on how sexual our society is, and as far as what we're able to see on TV and advertisements, it's more, but people themselves have always been, people have always been having sex in and out of marriage. I don't think the rates have changed that much, and especially now after reading this, I'm not convinced that it was that much different. Now, the really sad thing about this book is these women were not told their rights. They weren't told that keeping their baby was an option, and so many of them were just coerced into giving up their children, which is part of the reason that this was very hard for me to read sometimes, and it was very emotional. And these women grieved for years. It affected their lives for the rest of their life. It affected them in some way. A lot of women went on to immediately get married to someone who they weren't really compatible with, just to try to start having babies and try to replace that baby that was basically taken away from them. Or other ones just chose not to have any children at all because they felt they weren't worthy of having another baby because they just gave their first baby away. And a big theme in this is how little the women fought to keep their babies. And that isn't like a dig against them. Again, it was just so pervasive that this just was not an option, that they just, so many of them just didn't fight. They gave their babies away. They didn't even know that they could keep them. And they weren't informed of their rights. That's one of the most shocking things that I read, and the personal stories that I read in here, was how many people were involved in coercing these girls and women to giving away their babies. I mean, social workers that knew the laws and never sat down and told them, okay, here are your options. Legally, you aren't required to do this. You know, it's all up to you, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't the attitude then. It was, you're selfish if you're even thinking of keeping this baby. Sign this paper. And even not telling them, if a woman did say, I want to see my baby, bring me my baby, I don't really want to do this, you know, these people would basically lie to them and say, oh no, well, you can't, you've already signed away your rights, you haven't done this, when nothing was legally binding yet. So many stories were like that, and it broke my heart. I could probably talk about this book for way longer than I need to. And the really sad thing about it too is it was such a shameful thing that these women couldn't even grieve openly, and they didn't get the care that they needed, their mental health care that they would need after relinquishing a child. They weren't counseled, and it was a secret, shameful thing, and many of them never talked about it ever again. And it really makes you wonder how many of our own mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunts, how many of them went away and gave birth to a secret child who they never talked about for the rest of their life. Now, after reading this, there must be countless families who have members missing and they don't even know it. That's the sad thing. And so many women went to their graves with their secret. And they never told their husbands or their subsequent children or anything. And it's just super, super sad. I do highly recommend that you read this book, though. I recommend it to everyone. Everyone should read this book. It's not an easy read. It's not a super fun one, but it is mind-blowing, and it can definitely encourage some empathy toward adoptive mothers or women in this time period, and it really makes you realize how important sex education is, and the rights of women when it comes to their children, for sure. So I recommend this book. I loved it in a weird, I hate it way. I don't know. But I definitely recommend The Girls Who Went Away. So those are the 3 books that I have finished most recently. I'm reading another one of my own books right now, and I'm still kind of extending my Read Your Own Books challenge, although I did check out one book for myself at a recent library trip, but I want to finish just a couple more of my own books before I let myself read this library book. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my reading update, and if you did, you know, subscribe and you could see more if you're into that stuff and whatever. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I'll see you all again really soon.